This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Welcome to the home of education conversation. This is the Monday morning break. I'm your host, Kuttig. And my guest today is John Cat author Roy Blatchford.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome again. Welcome to this Monday morning break, live on this Monday, 14th of October. We're glad you could join us. My guest today is Roy Blatchford, founder of the National Education Trust and author of the A to Z of Great Classrooms. Roy and I will be talking about his book and exploring together the magic of great classrooms. So do stay with us. Roy, hello, 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 and welcome to the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Good. I'm glad you made it. Thank you so much, Roy, for being so gracious, especially today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Roy Blatchford's birthday today. It is also my younger brother's birthday, but that is beside the point. It's Roy's birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday from all of us here from on Teachers Talk Radio. I hope you've got something nice planned other than being with me.
Well, later this afternoon, can you hear me all right?
I hear you perfectly well, thank you.
Well, later this afternoon, I live in Oxford. I'm going in London to see the great new Van Gogh exhibition as a special treat.
Oh, well, going into London is always a special treat. When I lived in Canterbury, whenever, we had a day off or, if we so wished, just take the high speed one into London, that was a treat in itself. So I hope you have a great day. But first, let's do this, Roy. Birthdays aside, tell us about yourself. What have you done? What have you been doing? And how did you get to where you are now?
Okay, well, it's quite a long story as I'm just getting to the age of 70. When I left university, I went into publishing. Publishing didn't suit me because I had to be behind a desk all day, so I started truanting a long time ago. But so I've always sympathised with actually youngsters, I have to say provocatively, who truant from school if it isn't very interesting. Not a popular thing to say, but we have to make schools really interesting, and that's why I'm absolutely inspired by classrooms all the time. I then started teaching in Brixton Prison. That always fascinated me. Winston Churchill said that you can judge a society, Khan-Duke, by the way it treats its prisoners. And I've had a lifelong association as a prison visitor and so on with the prison service. And so I started teaching in Brixton Prison. And then I graduated, if you like, to teach in primary and then secondary schools in London, later in Oxfordshire and Milton Keynes, where I've been a head teacher, a principal. So that's kind of the first part of the story, just in schools.
Right. And I mean, I was just thinking as you were, just laying that out for us to write something, right? Like, the A to Z of great classrooms, or to even start talking about great classrooms, you've got to have considerable classroom experience to actually be able to say, with authority, this is what a great classroom should have. This is what you need to do for the magic, the good magic to happen. I think there are quite a lot of people out there from the theory side, right? Educational psychologists. I mean, they all do valuable work. That's not to say that their work isn't great, but I think there's a lot of coming from the teacher perspective, I think, and myself being a teacher and working with young people who are going out to teach in schools in that age group of 7 to 19, people think that there's a disconnection between, what educational psychologists, what theories say makes up good teaching, what good teaching is, what contributes to learning, and what teachers on the ground actually experience for themselves. So I think you're definitely the best person to discuss this with me today.
Well,
Um,
I mean, I think probably I'd just say I'm pretty grounded in teaching. If you work out that, let's say you teach 5 lessons a day for 200 days a year. I mean, most teachers are teaching, whether they're primary or secondary, probably about 800 sessions
mhm.
a year. And if you think of all that Malcolm Gladwell stuff about 10,000 hours of purposeful practice, after 10 years, and I did 30 in the classrooms, after 10 years, people have taught, well on 8,000 lessons. So I think I've probably, counting it up, Kandu, taught 25 to 30,000 lessons. And subsequently, as an HMI, running a reading charity, leading the National Education Trust, and all the work I do today around the world, I've observed 16,000 lessons and been
Mm.
party to. So that's my evidence base.
Right, right. I think it's really, really interesting that you've seen, so many classrooms all over the world, because I can only say my classroom experience really is limited, first of all, as a teacher in higher ed in Germany and one university in the UK. And then to looking at compulsory education, again, my only experience is being a parent of two kids in compulsory education, one in elementary school, primary school, and the other in secondary school. And that's it. Oh, okay. Well, I went to school myself, so that
Yes.
was that was in Singapore in the 80s, which again, totally different classroom culture, totally different teaching culture. And everything else I know is anecdotal. I hear, PISA tests, and we ever so often we get a snippet in the news about, how Finnish schools are, schools in Finland are so successful, and what are we doing wrong, and yet we don't, there's no change. But
Well,
let
you've covered quite a range of things there. Just one reference. I
uh-huh.
mean, hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in international comparisons. There's a wonderful book you may know called Cleverlands by Lucy Crayon, and
Mm-hmm.
she visited the great Cleverlands, Singapore, Finland, and so on of the world, and tried to sum up what made them special. And of course, they are all special. But what's profoundly true is that you can't necessarily, in political terms, and politicians sometimes try to do this, import, for argument's sake, Singapore maths into classrooms in Slough or Paris.
Mm-hmm.
Cultural differences do matter. And so, whilst I think there are some generics, whether you're in an early years classroom or like you, teacher training in Germany, wherever you are in the world, there are some generic truths, the A to Z of great classrooms, as I would put it. But cultural capital, cultural context varies enormously from, Seattle, Mumbai, Shanghai, Dubai, as I often put it. Cultural capital is different in those contexts, even though in the end, schools are about three things. They're about the buildings, they're about the children, and about the teachers.
I like how you say that schools are about three things: the building, the students, and the teachers. And definitely what you say, the cultural capital, it's so different. When I came out of my own school experience, right, I did my entire schooling in Singapore right up to A levels, and I moved to Germany and got into teaching in Germany. Well, first of all, studied in Germany. For me, it was an absolute culture shock, and then when I started teaching in Germany, to kind of, you learn, it's that whole apprenticeship of observation as a teacher. Um, your the most considerable experience you've ever had is not the teacher training necessarily, but what you've observed yourself as a student watching your teachers do. So I obviously, brought that whole heritage with me, and it didn't work in the German classroom. And then at the same time, when I moved to the UK and bringing that, after I've kind of got used to the German system and developed a style that suited the German learning and teaching culture. And I went to England. It was a totally different culture altogether.
Well,
And
listening to you there, I'm always fascinated when I work both in this country and overseas, and I'm about to go off for a month into the Middle East, working with schools there, international and government. I'm often asked, Khan, if where would you send a child of yours, ideally in the world? I'm fascinated that you've had that mix, and I
mhm,
say, oh, British primary education, English primary education, copied and revered throughout the world, is probably the best you'll come across. I've been into 7 Lift primary academies this term, and let me tell you, life is very good and all is well in the primary years in England today. Some wonderful leadership, wonderful experience for children, real joy in learning. So I say always around the world, British primary education is the best I see. As far as secondary is concerned, I'm less convinced that the best is in England, but I would go to Germany or Switzerland, mainly because of the value of whether you're academic or vocationally minded. You'll get a fair chance within those systems. There isn't, as there often is in England, a kind of almost an apartheid between the old grammar school, the secondary, modern, the comprehensive. In Germany and Switzerland, I think you value that vocational strand. That's secondary. As far as tertiary is concerned, having worked in an American university for a while, if you can afford it, big question,
mhm.
if you can afford it, I think that American tertiary education, places like Vanderbilt and so on, are stunning. The top end of the American university system is stunning. So my point there would be maybe primary in Britain, secondary in Germany and Switzerland, tertiary in America, but no one system has all the answers, even though I know, having been to Singapore, it's pretty good there.
Mm, mm. But we digress. We digress.
Oh.
But what you just said before we go on to the book and what the whole magic of great classrooms. We digress. When you say Germany and Switzerland, yes, my heart the little palpitations because I do think, and many people have said to me that they do envy young people in Germany because of the options that they have coming out of primary school and going into secondary school. Well, they do have to stay in secondary school, compulsory schooling up to age 16, but they have got lots of options from age 16 onwards, and also within that secondary school years, those years between 10 and 6, they've got also different school forms, as you will, different school forms that cater to those who are more capable academically, those who are more hands-on, um, and helping them develop skills for life. The only drawback, and I hear this from people who've been in the Singapore, British, Irish system, is that the kids in Germany they're only in primary school for 4 years. So when they go to secondary, they've just turned 10, and you don't know. Many people say, at that age they may not have developed their study skills. They've not developed any strategies for learning, so they're too young to actually be thrown into that system. But let's leave that aside. Let's talk about the A to Z of great classrooms. Where did the idea come from?
Well, I suppose it's rooted obviously in being a teacher, being a head teacher, and then I spent a few years as one of Her Majesty's inspectors of schools, an enormous privilege where you go to see, well, you see the best, you see some of the not so good. But one of the things that struck me, Kandu, was that even when I was in less good schools, which were described as being failing or in special measures in UK terminology, even and especially in those schools, there were some wonderful teachers doing wonderful things. And although the overall institution might have been, not as effective as it might have been, wherever I go in any institution, I was seeing, really interesting lessons, exciting lessons, joyful lessons. And then I set up the National Education Trust with a group of trustees who asked me basically to set up a do tank, a think tank
Mm-hmm.
that does. which was all about celebrating best practice across this country and more widely. So the National Education Trust, I set up with a colleague, Mark Rowland, and we ran that for 10 years. And during that period, I was asked by the government to lead the writing of the teachers' standards. The teachers' standards exist. I'm very proud of those. Still, 12 years on, 13 years on, they're still in operation in this country. And in working abroad, I've taken those teacher standards to other jurisdictions. And I suppose at the heart of those teacher standards, when we wrote them, I was the lead author, I tried to capture what it is that makes up the cocktail, that what I call the great double act of teaching and learning. Mm. And so I suppose that was the genesis. And then, of course, over many years, I've seen, 15,000 classrooms plus. And so I thought, let's try and capture this. And I had half a mind in a wider series, which we'll come on to later. But I thought writing it around the A to Z of the English alphabet would be different in different jurisdictions. And I've had great fun in Arabia and other jurisdictions looking at the A to Z, or the equivalent, of what words you might choose. But essentially, the book, which is, first in about 15 in the series, in essence, the A to Z of Great Classrooms is a kind of celebration of that magical double act of teaching and learning. And it's organized around the 26 letters of the English alphabet, which in this particular book takes you from arrival and behaviors to marking and outdoors, and ends up with Zune. And you may know that Zune Phananta, the speaking animal, is what the Greeks called the humans. So that's the A to Z. And probably just one little bit before we go into more detail is, in the foreword, I asked a CEO of one of the leading academy groups in this country to write a foreword. Mm-hmm. And she wrote, having read the book obviously before it was published, she said, in part guide and in part disguised memoir these pages offer. So in part guide and in part disguised memoir. And I think she captured pretty well that, yes, this was a guide to great classrooms, but also as a writer, you reveal yourself. So there's quite a lot of anecdote within it as well.
Yes, I read that. I thought that was really interesting what she said, that it's, partly a memoir, also, reflections. What I thought interesting was where you shared that you'd ask teachers all over the world for their A to Zs, right? Just out of curiosity, what was the one or a few of them that really made you laugh or made you reflect a little, where you thought, I never thought of that?
Oh my goodness, where to begin? I think what's interesting in the process of writing it is you think you're going to write, arrival, behaviors, craft, differentiation, environment. But then as you're writing them, other words crop up. And one of the things I've done quite a lot with in-service sessions around the world is give people the contents and dip into the book and then say, which words are you really surprised are not in the chapter headings? And that's always a lovely exercise, because people then begin to think, and I say to them nicely, help me write my second edition. But it's interesting that people will come up with, Roy, why have you put reading when relationships are so much more important? Or why have you used E for environment when empathy is so much more important? And one could go on. But I find it fascinating when working with teachers. Obviously, I've selected a number of A to Z. These are my words. But it's interesting what other teachers will come up with all of their ideas from around the world. And often, of course, and I picked this up in one of the chapters, if you're teaching early years, so, the great early years education, I think that's in this country, if you go to be an early years teacher, your motivation is really to work with children, of course, and how they develop and all that exciting stuff, the great years. However, if you enter teaching to teach chemistry or physics or maths with, let's say, 16-year-olds, your motivation is often your subject first and then your students second. It's a really interesting discussion. If you compare and you want to characterize it, nay, caricature, primary is children first, subject second. Secondary is subject first, students second, is how often it's presented anyway. And I think that's often reflected in how people then orchestrate their classrooms.
Yeah, that's really true. I think my jury is still out on people's motivations for going into secondary education. Most of my students are training to be secondary teachers, and at the moment, I mean, we've just started uni, and they've had to write reflections, opening reflections. I'm introducing them to reflective practice, and their first class last week. I mean, their first task at the end of class last week was to write a short paragraph about a critical incident that, motivated them to take up this profession or to go into teacher education. My students aren't the fastest, so I've only got two at the moment, two reflections at the moment, and reading them, both of them have not had pleasant experiences in school. So they've had, for them, each person an incident where they very clearly saw that the teacher's behavior was, less than exemplary, and they then decided, I'm one way to change this, one way to change the narrative is for me to go into teaching and to, be better than the teachers that have taught me. I've not had, I have had students who've said, oh, I want to become an English teacher. I teach English. I want to become an English teacher because, I like the subject. But then they do struggle. They do struggle in terms of the content knowledge and sometimes also personality. So I do wonder whether it's this cohort, the ones who struggle, the ones who lack the confidence to develop their content knowledge, or the ones who've just, been very good apprentices of observation, who only see the good things about teaching, who then decide, I'm going to become a teacher. So
I think it's an interesting point about vocation.
mhm.
I mean, my father was a head teacher and said to me, Roy, don't teach. And I didn't listen to him. My brother is an accountant, so he listened to my father. But I think, when you talk to teachers of why they're in the business, I think what's really interesting, Kanduk, is why people leave. So if you think in this country, particularly through Teach First and all of the other systems, there are far too many people who leave after 3, 4, 5 years. And so one of the things that I think is going on, which is wonderfully true at this moment in this country, and particularly in some of the great academy partnerships, is the investment in teachers with instructional coaching and to make them want to stay part of the business. Because we're losing far too many. There's a little phrase in English called the pit, the pool of inactive teachers, and it's 500,000 people who have trained as teachers but doing other things. Now, many still stay in education,
Right.
but far too many leave schools. So I think as well as exploring why people come in, and one hopes there is a sense of vocation still, we need to do all we can as a profession to make sure people stick with us and are refreshed within the years they do. My father said one thing when I entered teaching, which was, make sure if you do 20 years, you don't do the same year 20 times. Do 20
Right.
different years. And I think that's always great advice to new teachers, young teachers, young and old coming into the profession. Stay fresh.
Yeah. Definitely. And, there are different ways of staying fresh. Teachers' mental well-being is a big topic as well
Yes.
nowadays, isn't it? But
Yeah.
let's just listen to the education news first, and then we will come back to some snippets from your book.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading!
Are you a teacher who has concerns about your students' low reading levels? Are you also worried disadvantaged students won't be able to catch up? The online reading development programme, Dreambox Reading Plus, adapts to a student's skill level, accelerates reading progress, and helps students acquire a wide vocabulary. The patented technology develops reading fluency and supports the transition to increased text complexity from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3 and 4, where language and vocabulary are more challenging. You can try the programme with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot.
How do we stop teachers marking books on their kitchen table on a Sunday night instead of wanting to spend time with their family? Is live marking truly cutting-edge practice? What if I told you that I could provide evidence of verbal feedback and its impact on student outcomes? Now, traditional marking, time and time again, is reported as the #1 reason why teachers leave the profession. It trumps behaviour issues and teacher salary. In Guide to Feedback, I share 9 case study skills that demonstrate 9 different ways to provide marking and feedback, all evidenced by student outcomes. Now, not every school will be ready for this, but hopefully you are ready to start your Feed Up and Feed Forward journey.
The Teacher Toolkit Guide to Feedback is out now, and you can get an exclusive 30% discount when you order Teacher Toolkit Guide to Feedback from bloomsbury.com. Just use the code TTRGTF at the checkout. That's TTRGTF, and it expires 30th of November. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at Bet UK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at Bet UK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Teacher Tap blog has published its latest update. Recent questions have focused on teachers' overall satisfaction with work at this point in the term and year. A recent question about what can cause stress for teachers suggests that student behaviour is top of the charts, followed by admin tasks and pastoral concerns for pupils. Senior school staff, however, were more likely to focus on pastoral concerns, followed by relationships with parents and then accountability. Middle leaders feel the most stress over admin tasks. Teacher satisfaction is a key focus in any discussion on retention and recruitment, and it's recruitment that government have focused on with their latest announcement on bursaries for new teachers entering the profession. A Department for Education update published on the government website contains details for the 2025 to 2026 academic year. Bursaries in some science subjects, maths and computing, are £29,000. £10,000 is available for trainees in art and design, music and RE, with English trainees qualifying for £5,000. Bursaries for undergraduates studying for a course including QTS in some sciences, maths, computing or languages are also on offer. Full details can be found on the .gov.uk website. For support staff, legislation to reinstate their negotiating body, the SSSNB, was introduced in Parliament via the Employment Rights Bill. With many schools expressing concern over difficulties in recruiting key support staff, and those already employed concerned over low pay, this could be key. Schools Week covered the story, saying it was part of attempts to establish national terms and conditions, fair pay and career progression routes. The changes will apply to maintained schools and academies. This currently do not have to follow national pay rules. The SSSNB was scrapped in 2010, but the Department for Education said the reintroduction of it makes a key milestone in its commitment to reset the relationship with the sector. The BBC reports that a science, technology, engineering and maths event on the Isle of Man
has had to be postponed due to transport issues. The 4th annual STEM Fest, which sees all the island's primary children take part, has been due to take place on the 23rd and 24th of October. The Department for Education said the decision to push back the event was taken due to significant logistical challenges as a result of bus driver shortages. The STEM event was designed to spark interest in the field of science and technology and allow young people to explore potential careers. The DFE on the island felt it was better to postpone rather than exclude some school, but the decision was regrettable. Schools Week reports that the Department for Education has scrapped a scheme forcing schools to opt out of receiving the optional Key Stage 1 SATs papers, which cost an estimated £1.6 million last year. In 2023-24, the Standards and Testing Agency required schools to opt out of receiving the SATs materials, despite them being non-statutory. As fewer than 1 in 10 primaries opted out, the DFE estimated printing costs of £1.5 million. Teacher Tap survey results showed that 60% of primary teachers would continue with the Key Stage 1 SATs. However, the STA says the papers will no longer be reprinted, but made available for download instead. Schools can order hard copies of modified test papers. The Times featured the BBC Young Musician lineup, who it says shared 2 things in common: a talent for music and the fact that none of them attend a state school. The BBC competition has run for decades and is seen as a way to get young people more involved in classical music. This year there has been some criticism of the judging of the competition and the narrow selection of finalists in terms of the instrument specialisms. No woodwind, brass or percussion players. However, the editorial piece does focus more on the fact that all 6 finalists attend private or specialist music schools. The writer Richard Morrison goes on to describe state school music teaching as a postcode lottery. He goes on to highlight previous winners of the competition who have attended state schools, but points out that even learning an instrument can be costly and that this simply excludes many young people from developing a talent over the long term. There has been much debate over the importance of the arts in schools. The BBC Young Musician competition continues to add nuance to the debate about music. Finally, the TES reports on research by the Education Policy Institute that longer days improve students' grades. Sort of. The author of the study says it shows that pupils in schools with longer days perform better, but says further research is needed into how those hours are being spent. Schools are typically open for 190 days. Academies and free schools can be more flexible. In 2022, the previous government also laid out the expectation that all schools should deliver a school week of at least 32.5 hours. The EPI research found that in 2023-24, 4 in 5 primary schools and 3 in 4 secondaries met the 32.5-hour minimum. The research also shows that an additional hour of secondary school time each week is associated with a 0.17 grade improvement in one subject, whilst an additional hour in primary is associated with improvements in Key Stage 2 scale scores in maths and reading. This is consistent with international research, which points to longer school weeks having modest effects on attainment. As with all research, there are plenty of caveats. Longer days does not necessarily mean longer lessons, nor what those lessons are or how balanced a curriculum might be. Past research says that additional hours have greatest effect when pupils are taught by their regular teacher. Being taught one-to-one or in a small group setting also helps. These are all costly for schools and indicative that more might only be better in certain circumstances. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Okay, everybody, so welcome back to Teachers Talk Radio, the home of education conversation. We've got Roy Blatchford with us today, author of The A to Z, or A to Z, of Great Classrooms by John Catt. Let's get right into the content, to the ideas, some of the ideas in the book, Roy, and, just risking being boring here, I would like to start with A for arrival. And I want to start with that because I read it with great interest. And as I read it, I thought, I never thought of that. I, never thought about how, students coming into school, whether it's the corridors or the bells. I'd actually never thought of that having an impact on learning and teaching. For me, I think it was just my psyche. And before you share your thoughts on arrival, I just wanted to share that, in that section you mentioned student friendly routines, and I'd like to share that my son, he's in year 4 of primary school, and I think that he's got a really student friendly routine. I don't know if it's specific to his class, something that his teachers have done, have set up as part of their routine, or if it's a school-wide thing and what they have. So kids here in Germany, they have to be in school at 5 to 8. So school start is anywhere, depending on the school, anywhere between 7:55 and 8:05. And what my son has got, so he says that now post-COVID, they come to school and they go straight into the classroom, and they greet each other, they play, they do whatever. And when, I don't know whether he says that there's a morning bell or not, but at some point, I think when the teacher comes into class, my son tells me they have half an hour of self-study, or it's just called admin. They call it admin. And he tells me that in that time, the kids, the children, can do whatever it is they want to do, whether it's tidying up their desk drawer. They have a desk drawer under their desk. They also have a separate drawer, like a dentist's office, where you've got these cases on wheels with multiple drawers, and every child has one. They can spend time tidying that up. They can catch up on homework, actually. And he said that to me before, when he's not finished something and he didn't want to do it at home. And he said to me, he said, oh, well, I can do it tomorrow at admin time. And I think that is something that's really student friendly, compared to coming in at 8 and going, okay, let's check attendance, and then going wham bam into the content of the class. So that is one experience I have of a student friendly routine. Your thoughts, Roy?
Well, I think what you've just described there most eloquently is, what quite a lot of primaries that I visit do, and less probably is true in secondary. But I make the point, the reason I began with arrival, and it probably also worth saying, when you're writing an A to Z, you're juggling around with the words. What do you begin with ambition?
Mm-hmm.
Do you begin with arrival? I've got the range of books in the series in front of me. Some people have begun with accountability. There's another book here which has begun with ambition, and there's another book here that's begun, which is the maths book on assessment. So arrival, I think for me, and it's back to, you mentioned earlier on about mental health, mental well-being. All my experience in schools and learning is that you have to be in the right frame of mind as a learner and a teacher, but as a learner, if you're going to take advantage of the teaching. And so the frame of mind is certainly determined, is it not, from the moment you walk into the building. One of my definitions of great primary education is parents at the gate, the children run in and don't even look back. And at the end of the day, this was certainly true of my son, he used to cry when he left school. He didn't want to come back home. He was having such a good time. So I think that kind of state of being, mental well-being, how the day is orchestrated in time. Many schools now, secondary schools as well, have abandoned bells and buzzers. Some have introduced rather nice kind of music. There are lots of things, if you look around schools, which are not necessarily always conducive to good mental well-being. And schools which are, as I put it in this chapter, careful rather than care less about the environment. I think obviously that gives the children a kind of an absolute march. On the subject of marching, and I'm using that word because some schools in this country, I don't come across it much abroad, they have corridors where students must move silently around the building. Now, that's an anathema to me, but actually for some regimes, they say this is really important. There are some schools, many schools, which I think are very good, where the teachers teach with the door open, literally and metaphorically, but teaching with the door open is teachers saying, come in and watch us. We're having a good time. We're learning. We're the cocktail in this room is really good. So schools do things in different ways. I don't have a particular prescription. It's about environment, displays and so on. I don't have a particular prescription because I think schools need to decide what they want to do. But all great schools, in my experience, which create great classrooms, have thought about the arrival in the classroom, the routines, the environment, and then the best teaching and learning can take place. Perhaps one other thing I'll mention on this is, for me, when I go into a room, Kundu, is it airy? Is it the right temperature? Is the light good? Some schools around the world, in India, for example, I've been into, the fan is so noisy that children can't hear what's going on. We don't have that problem in England with the heat.
Right.
But that environmental aspect, and for me, how furniture is configured, I have a later chapter on furniture. How furniture is configured is really very important. Though I didn't actually call the chapter furniture, but I put it into environment. My F chapter is, of course, fun.
Right. You talk about at the beginning of the show, you mentioned, we agreed that there were three things, right, that makes up the school, the classroom, or the teaching profession. It's the school, so the physical building, physical classrooms, the students, and the teachers. And here with Arrival and what you talk about just now about, the door being open, it just brought me back to my own years as a student in hot, humid Singapore. And actually, when you talked about the doors being open, I don't think my classrooms had a door. I mean, we came in through the doorway, but there was no physical door. And I remember that you could walk past any classroom, and as you're walking along the corridor, it goes without saying, you wouldn't be yelling and screaming as you were walking along the corridor past other classrooms. There was just that respect for people in the classroom. But you could walk by, quietly and peek in and see all the fun that was happening in there. Or maybe if a particular class was doing a test, then you could, see the despair and feel their pain. But it wasn't something that was hidden, something where if you're walking along, you'd be wondering, oh, I wonder what's going on there. And I compare that to the schools that I know in Germany, where you've only got windows and two doors, and the doors are closed, and there's no, you've got a door at either end of the classroom to go in and out, and between those two doors is a wall. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like you walk past and there's just this whole corridor full of walls and doors, and you cannot see inside, so you don't know what's happening.
I couldn't agree more about that analysis on environment. And you remind me when I first started working in India 15 years ago, and we were working with entrepreneurs who were converting farms and farmyards into classrooms. I wrote a book then just for locally called Sparkling Classrooms. Mm-hmm. And these were classrooms which were literally, they were farmyards and sties for animals and so on, being turned into classrooms with, radical transformation with colour, but they didn't have doors. All the children, of course, were on carpets. But I say in my chapter on environment, I begin it, architects and designers shape lives, and then go on to talk about whether you're talking about houses or schools. But I fundamentally believe that environment issue, and also in India, of course, they, because of the monsoon, on hallways and so on, displays just don't survive. So it's really important, I think, to remember, as I said earlier on, context makes a difference and you adapt accordingly. But environment, we've talked about arrival, we've talked about environment. I think those are underpinning themes in classrooms all over the world. And the other thing probably to say, I do have a chapter on the well-being of the teacher, because I go into classrooms which are quite dark sometimes, or the blinds are down. And I think for the well-being of the teacher, how lovely it is when I go into a room which is light and airy. And probably also my little story on what teachers should be doing in classrooms is every classroom should have three things. One, a water cooler for the children. Number two, an espresso machine, or one of those coffee machines for the teacher. But thirdly, a chaise longue or a sofa at the back of the classroom where just occasionally the teacher can sit down and let the children work harder than she or he is. Really important. The children should be working harder than the teacher because the teacher's done all the good planning. And so for me, that would be a tip on any classroom. Water for the children, coffee probably for the teacher, or whatever if you want cha.
Yeah.
But certainly some sort of space where teachers can relax a bit and let the children loose in that nicest possible way to be independent learners and work free of the teacher's control, if control means too much intervention.
Well, the world we live in today, they'll have all sorts of reasons why, health and safety reasons why you can't have a water cooler and you can't have a chaise lounge because, maybe someone might fall over it or something
Yeah, but
like
it
that.
is true, of course, that almost all children these days have their own water bottle by their
Yeah.
side and sip at that. And teachers, of course, don't take hot coffee into classrooms unless they've got the lid on the top. But I'm making a point, really, about the well-being of teachers' children in an environment being really important.
Yeah. I mean, I get your point, and what I would summarize it as, that the classroom should have a welcome design, not just for the kids, with their, colorful posters on the wall and low chairs and ergonomic tables and things like that. But it also has to be, the classroom also has to be welcoming for the teacher. Teachers in Germany, both primary school and secondary school teachers, they don't have their own workspace in the staff room. Schools do have a staff room, but they share workspaces. So even at lunch, and I've had a friend tell me this, she is a teacher in a secondary school, and she said to me she can't eat lunch at school. She doesn't eat lunch at school. So she teaches straight through to 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, whatever. And then she goes home for lunch. And when I asked her why, because I remember my own teachers in school, they all had, it was an open plan office, but they all had their desk. It was their desk to decorate and to make pretty, and to personalize as they wish. And they could have a little bit of time out if they wanted there. And my friend who she said to me, well, no, in Germany, you don't have your own desk. And then somebody recently said to me, oh, teachers in Germany, they leave as soon as school is out. And, people in Asia or Singapore anyway, they stay in school until 7, 8 o'clock at night and do their work. And I explained then that, well, I think, it'd be a bit unfair to kind of just generalize and say, oh, well, German teachers are, less than hardworking. I said, I think many teachers do leave right after school because it's not welcoming to them. They haven't got that space, where they can work. So they all end up working at home. And it's something that I tell my students they don't see as part of their apprenticeship of observation. They don't see all the work that teachers do outside of school. Not in Germany anyway. I remember always seeing my teachers. When I was growing up, we had a small school building, so we were the generation where it wasn't single session schools where you started at 7:30 and finished at 2, but we had double session. And when I was in the afternoon session, that started at 1 and finished at 6, and I get on the bus and I'd see teachers from the morning session, on the buses, or as I run along the corridors, I'd see teachers from either session working in the staff room. But They
I
were
think
happy.
I think you make a couple of really interesting points there again about culture. Fascinating listening to you. I think you're a three culture child, aren't you?
I am very much so. Yeah.
Trois langues, trois cultures, which I come across quite a lot in in English, French, and Arabic in the Middle East. But so you make two, I think, really interesting cultural points. One is that I went to school in France for a period, and it was always true, of course, there that the teachers taught you. They then went home and did their prep and all the rest of it, and other people came and did all the social activities and the clubs. That's cultural in Germany and France. In England, of course, it's different. Teachers also do a lot of the clubs as well as the teaching. So there's a kind of cultural difference there. But I think you also touch on a really interesting point ahead is about flexible working. And there's no doubt about it. As you know, legislation is being introduced in England as we speak, but all around the world in terms of recruitment and retention. Post-COVID, leaders of institutions are looking at how to provide flexible working so that teachers can, for argument's sake, work in school 4 days a week, but do prep the fifth day at home. So I think there's a really interesting, maybe it's for a future program, to look at how flexible working, I see it all over the place in schools, is coming into being.
I mean, teachers need that downtime. I mean, teachers who have, say, a full-time contract, 40-hour contract, the amount of work that they put in and what they do. I always say, when I'm standing in front of the classroom, I put in 4 times as much energy as when I'm at my desk. I think it's just impossible. And I'm so grateful that where I work, well, granted it's in higher education, that I've been allowed to, choose my teaching days and set my timetable as I wish. So I'm not on campus. I'm not on site on Mondays and Fridays. I'm available for office hours. I do my lesson prep, but I have, the liberty really Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to just focus on the classroom, on the teaching. And I'm just so zapped at the end of the day. I mean, Wednesday I only teach one class, but just that one class, it takes all the energy out of me. On Thursday, I teach 4 back-to-back. So I teach from 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening, and I'm just zapped. I cannot do anything else after that. I just get on the bus and then get on the train and I fall asleep.
Can't do. It was interesting listening to the news in between our talking, and again, as so much research shows, what do teachers get worn out by? It is marking. But I do have a chapter in marking and feedback and so on, which you want to explore, where I do say that when I ask children around the world what the best teachers do, amongst many things, particularly the older students, but they all say the teachers mark my work and give it back to me promptly. And particularly when you get to exam classes, and I'm sure you do the same, as I write here, feedback is the fuel that propels the acquisition of knowledge and the embedding of new skills. And what children say to me consistently, and young people, when they talk about the value, the teacher they value, they say marks and signs their work regularly. And young children actually love their teacher's signature. They love it.
Yeah.
Secondly, the teacher who praises and critiques as appropriate, both orally and writing. In other words, doesn't praise things which are not worthy of praise, but balances that praise and critique. Thirdly, and you get this particularly from children probably from about 10 or 11 upwards, the next best steps. How can I improve my work? And obviously in exam classes, and you run those, the teachers who draw attention and careful attention to examination and test requirements. And those for me are, what children say. So no matter in a sense what the research says, it says lots of things. But when you talk to children, as I do all over the world, that's what they say they really value about a very good teacher. The marking and the feedback, it's prompt, it's of high quality, it helps me move on.
Yeah. Promptness, that's a problem in Germany. It's a problem in Germany. I say it's a problem in Germany because I think we don't have a policy on what constitutes as prompt marking. It's just, just mark the work. And my only comparison as an adult now, as a teacher, is having been in the UK, and it was stipulated that whatever work students had submitted for assessment needed to be marked and returned within 3 weeks. We don't have that policy. So my kids could, like my son did a math test last week, and they're on their half term now. They've got a 2-week break, and his test hasn't come back, and he has no idea when it will come back. You couldn't say, oh, it'll be back by then and then. And it's the same with my daughter, who's in secondary school. She has Latin as one of her foreign languages, and one of her teachers just took ages marking the next test. And I asked the class test, and I said to her, but aren't you supposed to get it back so that you would know where your weak points are, or we could start revising? And she said to me, oh, no, that's okay. As long as they don't return the test back, they can't give us the next test. As in they can't, first of all, the students can't write the next test. But for me as a parent, and because I know, if you're learning languages, you've got to put in a little bit more effort, something my daughter struggles with, is that I know she could get the test back today, and she'd be told then today, oh, your next test is next week. And that's just so unfair for the kids.
Well, I think it's worth saying, isn't it, about marking that, I don't know whether you've got any doctor friends. I've got one who complains about the admin. So, sees patients 4 days a week, but has a day of admin. And I say every job as its equivalent of Sunday night marking. I mean, that goes with the territory. I think that said, there have been some really good efforts through movements like No More Marking in this country to try and reduce it. And of course, the holy grail is, will AI begin to reduce workload? Not necessarily, could be in planning, but certainly in marking. And I see in some of the best international schools in the world some really interesting cutting edge practice where AI is marking not only, if you like, maths answers, but even history essays. So I think, that probably is something to come.
Yeah. And I mean, to just, finish off with the idea of marking, what I also think is that the feedback you give students is as good as the assessment you give them. And if all your assessments are paper-based and you're killing yourself over the marking, and you can see that it's detrimental to the students because all they're doing is that they're learning for the test, then, schools should be allowed, teachers should be allowed to be a little bit more creative in their assessment, because that would also address different learner types.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, curriculum shapes assessment. Curriculum and assessment systems shape how you teach in the classrooms. And if you take some of the best IB, International Baccalaureate lessons, where they have project-based learning, and the outcome is presentations to parents and their peers, that is much more liberating than a test, a paper test. A few years ago, I chaired a commission in this country called the Forgotten Third, which is about the third of children who don't get their grade 4 in English and maths at 16. And we recommended there a 4-pronged approach to assessment, 25 out of 100%, 25% oral, 25% a written test, but 25% portfolio, and a 25%, in the zeitgeist, looking at how you could produce podcasts or all kinds of things. So you're quite right to say assessment and marking can be quite limiting. And I think in the best curricula in the world, and particularly one thinks of the IB principled learner, it's quite liberating.
Yeah. Anyway, we are going to look at one more thing, but first we've got some messages.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Are you a teacher who has concerns about your students' low reading levels? Are you also worried disadvantaged students won't be able to catch up? The online reading development program, Dreambox Reading Plus, adapts to a student's skill level, accelerates reading progress, and helps students acquire a wide vocabulary. The patented technology develops reading fluency and supports the transition to increased text complexity from Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3 and 4, where language and vocabulary are more challenging. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot.
How do we stop teachers marking books on their kitchen table on a Sunday night instead of wanting to spend time with their family? Is live marking truly cutting-edge practice? What if I told you that I could provide evidence of verbal feedback and its impact on student outcomes? Now, traditional marking, time and time again, is reported as the #1 reason why teachers leave the profession. It trumps behaviour issues and teacher salary. In Guide to Feedback, I share 9 case study skills that demonstrate 9 different ways to provide marking and feedback, all evidenced by student outcomes. Now, not every school will be ready for this, but hopefully you are ready to start your Feed Up and Feed Forward journey.
The Teacher Toolkit Guide to Feedback is out now, and you can get an exclusive 30% discount when you order Teacher Toolkit Guide to Feedback from Bloomsbury.com. Just use the code TTRGTF at the checkout. That's TTRGTF, and it expires 30th of November. Happy reading.
Do you ever wish you could sit down with other teachers and delve into the challenges and opportunities we face? Well, that's exactly what Table Talks at Bet UK is all about. Join small roundtable discussions based on your selected topics to share insights, learn from peers, and tackle the big issues in education, all in a sponsor-free environment. This is your chance to connect and collaborate like never before. Be part of the conversation at Bet UK in January 2025. Visit uk.betshow.com to learn more.
So we have Roy Blatchford with us, author of The A to Z of Great Classrooms. We've spoken about arrivals, we've spoken about environment, we've spoken about marking, feedback. Roy, what shall we? One more for the road.
Why don't we do questions or globe? I don't mind. I'll just quickly say, let me do globe, but let me just say in the chapter on questions, I do open it by saying that if I'm pushed to identify one particular aspect of great classrooms, I go for great questions. Because and you know this, as a great educator, if you know your stuff, you got your knowledge, but actually how to pass it on to others is through great questioning. And that might lead to the chapter that I've done on globe. Listeners might think, well, why has he chosen globe for G? Could have taken a number of things. But the reason I took globes, and this is back to part memoir in this book, but one evening as a head teacher, I was presenting my termly report to governors, which included a section on the curriculum in schools, past, present and future. Mm-hmm. And one of my governors, and I'm in Oxford, and she was an Oxford Don, distinguished biologist, Dr. Jane Mellenby, said, the only subject worth studying on the curriculum was biology, and that you could teach everything through biology. At which point, somebody else, who was a very keen geographer, said, oh no, geography is the only subject to teach in a curriculum. So it's a really interesting debate. Mm-hmm. And why I say every classroom should have a globe. And in early years, you can have those inflatable ones so the children can, hold the world in their hands. One of the things about the globe is that we need to teach children, do we not, about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We need to teach children about climbing inside another's skin. We need to talk about climate degradation, just as a great general knowledge. And so I think the globe, for me, about multilingual, multicultural, pluralist societies, the movement of peoples, the great challenges of our age, I say there should be a spinning, attractive, lighting up globe, could be physical or political, in every classroom, seriously. Because I think one of the things about schools, yes, they teach history and maths and so on, but in the end, schools, aren't they, are about civilizing and about inducting young people and children into a society, but into a global society. And for me, the symbol of a globe, Khan Duke, as a three culture person, is a really important thing. And so I do a whole chapter on globe.
I totally agree with you there, Roy. I was just, doing a bit of my own reflecting, and this is going to show my ignorance as a child, as a school kid. When I was growing up, it was a very, we were in our own world, Singapore, it was all about Singapore. When, even when we had history, it was about, the fall of Singapore, the Japanese occupation. So you kind of knew where Japan was. I knew where Vietnam was because my mother's Vietnamese. I knew where Germany was because my father's German. We learned about India, we learned about Malaysia, Indonesia, because they were our neighbors, but not beyond that. And when I hear when my children come back from school and they share the things that they've learned, my son's primary school has a partner school in, oh no, I don't know anymore, but it was somewhere in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And, and he comes back and he tells me things about Congo. Or recently, I think they were talking about in school about child labor. Now, when I was in primary school, we did not talk about child labor at all. But, he was talking about child labor. He'd learned about child labor in one of his subjects. And he came back and he asked me, he said, oh, and, where's Laos and where's Cambodia? And I think my daughter had one as well. And she had to do a poster project on child labor. And, it's so different from the 1980s. I mean, now I think children are truly living, this globalization and understanding that things that we do here in Europe or even anywhere else in the world, because you have that, also in Singapore where kids are learning more about Europe, is that we're all interconnected. We're not alone on our little proverbial island. I mean, Singapore, we were literally an island, but at that time it was not necessary, or it was deemed unnecessary for children to know anything that didn't directly impact them.
I think you put it so well, and we know almost every child, probably above the age of 10 these days, has a phone, and it's the world. It's a world, in their hands, and I think therefore all the more reason. Whilst all teachers, I talk in the book obviously about all teachers being teaching of reading and vocabulary and oracy, but for me, all teachers are teachers of kind of global values. And, if you recommend a book, say the wonderful Tim Marshall's book on the power of geography, there are so many things out there.
I have the book, yeah.
Yeah, or watching YouTube. And when I go into classrooms and youngsters are doing really great projects, which remind them that there's a world outside, and that business of climbing inside another's skin. What is it like to live inside another's skin? And whether I'm in, a small town in Essex or whether I'm in Florida, I mean, I remember when I was in Florida, children don't know what the next state is, and they certainly haven't traveled there. And, you can go to Hastings in this country and find children who haven't been to the beach. Seriously. So I think all that you say, and I'm probably listening to you and talking with you and about your own children's experiences, so many children are very, very lucky to just naturally have outward-facing families and communities where they see another side of the world. But there are lots of classrooms I visit, Kandu, where children look inwards and actually don't glimpse outside. And the latest column I've written on my website, Blinks, is all about cultural capital. because I think we owe it to children, whatever we're teaching, to thread that cultural capital through all of our lessons.
That's quite interesting. I said that to my students last week. I actually, my students, as part of their degree, they have to spend 90 days in an English-speaking country. So if they were studying English, if they were studying Spanish, then it would be, 90 days in a Spanish-speaking country. And I tell them that they shouldn't just, go somewhere. They can go anywhere and do anything. It's work and travel. They can also just travel through England for 2 weeks and then go somewhere else for another couple of weeks. Just, add up those 90 days as show the evidence that they've been in an English-speaking country. And I say to them, well, you shouldn't just do it as a matter of course and do it because you have to tick that box. I say, do it and learn something from it, because then when you go into the classroom, I tell them, I say, and you're working with young people, you're bringing them, the English language, you're bringing them culture of the English speaking world. I say, and if you're standing there in class and saying to those school kids, I've been to India, and in India, education, well, I might be wrong now, but, education is through the medium of English. The
Yes.
kids that you're working with you'll have that wow effect,
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And of course, it's interesting. All over the world, everybody learns English as their first language. We don't know in this country which to teach, and so we end up teaching French or German or whatever. One quick story on English. I was sitting with my wife in a restaurant in Piazza in Siena last summer, and the waitress we got chatting to, who, as I wrote later, spoke English as well as the average Dutch taxi driver. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful English with an American accent. And we kind of said to her, where have you lived in England or America? And she said, oh, Taylor Swift has been my English teacher. I've never been to an English speaking country. And seriously, if you know Taylor Swift's stuff, all her songs, of course, have all the lyrics on the screen. And this person genuinely had learned her English through Taylor Swift. But that's the power of English in our society, in our global world, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you remember Faulty Towers?
Oh, yes.
And this although I don't remember the Spanish guy's name, the role he played, but he said, do you remember? He goes, I learned English from a book. I used to think that was hilarious.
Manuel.
Manuel, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where we are with time. Could I just mention a couple of other things about the book, or do you say?
I think we are actually running out of time. So Can we just talk about the series? Sorry, Roy. So your book is one in a series by John Catt. It's the first one, right?
Yep.
So tell us about the rest of the series and what we can, expect to read in various ones. Have you got more coming out, etc., etc.?
Okay, well, the series format is, in every book, there's a section A and a section B. The section A is the A to Z. The section B is a whole range of other professional development materials. And in my own, I dedicated it to special educational needs. So I kind of rewrote the A to Z for special educational needs. That's the format. Just to give you just a flavour of a couple of others, Kate Frood, who's a wonderful educator, former head teacher, brilliant on maths. She's written the A to Z of primary maths, and that takes you, from games and habit and owling through to zero, of course. So primary maths has already proved very popular. For the international audience, Simon Watson, who's principal of a leading school out in the Middle East, has written the A to Z of international school leadership. And perhaps just to take one more, Rachel McFarlane, who's a distinguished educationist in this country, has written the A to Z of diversity and inclusion. And it's a compelling read. And, she moves obviously through subjects, metacognition and relationships and transitions. But that's the A to Z of diversity and inclusion. I'll probably be told off by all the other authors that I've not mentioned their book, but I can't mention them all. But suffice to say, each book is an A to Z of 1,500 words per chapter, with some fun asides within it for activities. And then section 2 is professional development materials to take the subject further.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like the asides in your book. I tried to do the first one, and yeah, now I'm gonna have to spend a little bit more time on that. But I think something also interesting from the list is early career teaching by Harry Hudson, right? I mean, that is, we've got a lot of titles for people who've been in the profession a bit longer, and you have new teachers, novice teachers who think then, oh, what about us? But you've got that one, or the series has that as well.
Well, thank you so much for mentioning that one. I've just signed off the proofs. It'll be published before Christmas, and it's written by a 29-year-old who I happen to play cricket with. He's a great teacher in West London, and he's really captured what it is to be, I think, a teacher generally, but really great advice. 26 chapters on, what's it like to take your first steps into the classroom. So I think I probably better send you a few for your students. But that's a really very good read, as they all are. But I'm particularly fond of that one at the moment because I've just signed off the proofs.
Yeah, well, I mean, the series when we were asked to or when we were given the option to speak to authors from that series, there were so many titles, and I couldn't do all of them, and I was toying between early career teaching or great classrooms. So I'm glad I went for great classrooms though, because with the work you do as an inspector and founder of the National Education Trust, it's just right up my alley. So thank you so much, Roy. That's really all we have time for today. Thank you for this hour. I've really enjoyed talking to you, talking about some of the ideas in your book. Great laugh. Also, it's not every day that I actually get to ask an author about their book, and also even less so that speak to somebody who's done amazing work the way you've done. So really, thank you so much for that.
And thank you for giving us that natural, wider global perspective, because I think that's an absolute model for all schools and all classrooms today.
Oh, thank you. So before we go, though, everyone, just a message that we've got more shows covering John Catt's A to Z series coming up. So remember, please, to like and subscribe to receive notifications of upcoming episodes and to support Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you so much, Roy. Have a good birthday. Enjoy the Van Gogh exhibition, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for listening and for chatting.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.